As federal and state officials continue to grapple with when and how to reopen the economy, the death toll here in the U.S. has doubled since last week. More than 40,000 people have died from COVID-19 nationwide, yet, despite the growing numbers, rallies were held over the weekend in protest of stay-at-home orders. With more on this, we are going to bring in Ian Lee.
Protesters around the country, many without masks and mocking social distancing guidelines, are demanding their states reopen.
They should actually listen to us sometimes instead of just listening to all of their models and their so-called experts.
It's the facts of life. We live and we die. So to shut down the economy because of that is insane.
However, a new poll finds most Americans are concerned states will reopen too quickly.
You make people sick here today, how are you going to apologize to them?
In Denver, Colorado, two people dressed in scrubs blocked a caravan of protesters. Last week, President Trump fired off tweets encouraging people to liberate 3 states.
They've got cabin fever. They want to get back. They want their life back.
Governors from both parties say the comments aren't helpful.
The president's policy says you can't start to reopen under his plan until you have declining numbers for 14 days, which those states and my state do not have.
The death toll in hard-hit New York is starting to drop. Governor Andrew Cuomo credits the stay-at-home order.
We can control the beast, yes, but the beast is still alive.
Many states want mass testing before reopening. Yesterday, President Trump says he will use the Defense Production Act to compel a company to produce 20 million swabs.
This is what it's about.
On Capitol Hill, lawmakers say they've made good progress on a $350 billion relief fund for small businesses. Ian Lee, CBS News.
So CBS News White House correspondent Weijia Jiang is standing by at the White House. So we heard in Ian's story about how governors are continuing to clash over this issue of when to open, when to get the economy started again. It seems like throughout this whole period, this COVID-19 period, the relationship between the governors and the president has ebbed and flowed. At times he's critical of them and then complimentary, and then sort of same thing goes with the governors. I don't know. Can we sort of assess what the state of the relationship is between the governors and the president at this point?
Well, you're right, Anne-Marie, in saying that from the very beginning, it has been a tumultuous relationship. And at the core of that, whether it's what we're seeing now, this debate unfolding about reopening, or what we saw in the beginning, at the heart is the federal government's role in providing supplies to the states. And from the beginning, governors have been essentially begging for more leadership from President Trump, for him to really step in and provide some sort of order when it comes to getting these critical supplies to the states. You'll remember in the beginning, it was all about PPE, that protective gear for hospital workers especially, and ventilators. And now it's about these testing kits. President Trump likes to talk a lot about the testing capacity, the potential for testing. He says it's very high. That may be true, but governors say that doesn't matter because they don't have the supplies to actually perform the tests. And so again, now they're asking him to step in, to use his full authority and to help them get these pieces of equipment that they need. But I think you're right to point out the other reason why it's been so shaky, and that's because the president has made clear that when he does do something for anybody, especially states, he wants praise in return. He wants public acknowledgement, and he wants them to say, frankly, that he's done a good job. In fact, we saw this unfold yesterday during the briefing. He played a clip of New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo praising him and how much help the administration gave New York with regard to ventilators and other supplies, and saying that it was a phenomenal job. There was apparently one line that didn't make it into the clip, and the president was very upset about that and scolded his staffers who put that clip together during the briefing. And they later had to come out and try to play it again, all because he wanted Cuomo to say during his briefing in this clip that he did a good job. And so what we've seen in response is that governors from both parties have publicly praised him and thanked him. because they've seen what happens when that doesn't happen. So they're walking a very fine line, trying to hold his feet to the fire and provide some leadership, but also massaging his desires, if you will, to be acknowledged.
You know, Weijia, I wonder what White House officials are telling you about surreal moments like that, where the President of the United States, faced with the staggering number of 41,000 Americans that have died because of COVID-19, more than now died in the Korean War. The president is focused on running video clips where he's being congratulated and talking to you and other members of the White House press corps about why you should be thanking him for some of the things that he's doing. And you get this disconnect. You get this disconnect between Anthony Fauci, who's on ABC News this morning, saying if you jump the gun and go into a situation where you have a big spike, you're going to set yourself back, talking about this rush to reopen certain economies. You get another moment like the president talking about those protesters who are going against the coronavirus task force recommendations to either stay at home or to be socially distant. The president standing at the podium saying, you could see that they're all, these protesters standing 6 feet apart, Weijia. When you roll the video, I don't know if we're running the video now, we can see with our very eyes that those protesters are not 6 feet apart. So I wonder when you go back and get some information from other White House officials, either on background or otherwise, what they tell you about what this could potentially mean for Americans who may be in danger because they're going out and disregarding some of the very real guidelines that have been established by Vice President Mike Pence and the coronavirus task force.
You know, on the one hand, you know, some sources are very defensive of President Trump in saying that he is being treated unfairly and not being given the credit that he deserves for all the steps that he has taken. On the other hand, behind the scenes, some people are much more candid in saying that they don't think he's doing himself any favors by turning these briefings into what they have become, which essentially is a campaign rally. You know that I have covered many of those rallies, and especially yesterday, I was struck by how similar the briefing felt to one of those rallies, because the president spoke for about 40 minutes, airing all sorts of grievances against his political rivals, against the media. He congratulated himself. And I think the moment where I really realized you know, what had just unfolded was when the vice president took the podium. And he began his remarks by offering condolences to the loved ones of the more than 41,000 Americans who have lost their lives in this vicious battle against the virus. And his tone was very somber, and he was trying to connect with the people in a way that the president did not just moments before him. And so clearly the president has a strategy here. He is not out campaigning. He knows that there's an election in November. And he, again, wants people to really see his side, which is that he has done so much for the country, continues to do that, and that he has a real grip on this pandemic. It's hard, though, to square when you hear from his other officials on the task force when they are saying that there's still a lot more work to be done, that it's no time to celebrate. And, you know, they warn that we could have a major resurgence if we are not careful.
You know, Weijia, you asked the president about some of his decisions that he's made to sort of mitigate the spread of the virus. And he went back to that same talking point about how in January he instituted this travel ban. When Paula Reed asked him, you know, I think it was last week, well, what did you do in February? He went back to this thing about instituting the travel ban. And I think, you know, many experts have now actually said that that was probably a good thing. But when you keep in mind the fact that this country has more coronavirus cases than any other country in the world, you have to wonder if instituting the travel ban was enough. So then why do you think he keeps going back to this point?
I think because there's a big missing piece of the puzzle between the date when he issued the travel ban, which was February 2nd, and the date that he declared a national emergency, which was March 11th. And there was a lot of time in between that where he wasn't doing anything to warn Americans of how quickly this virus was spreading. In fact, he was saying the opposite, downplaying it, saying that this would go away in April, that, you know, the flu is worse because it takes more lives, to just relax because one day it will disappear like a miracle. And so the one thing he keeps going back to is this restricted travel against Chinese nationals that he implemented. Well, Americans were also coming back from China. Tens of thousands have come back, and we don't know about the rate of infection among those people, and we don't know how closely they were tested and monitored and quarantined. But what we do know is that by the time he issued that ban, the virus was already here. And that's what I was asking him about yesterday. I said it was a fair point to bring up the ban because you kept it out, you kept other cases from coming in, new cases, but there were already existing cases in the US. And given how contagious this spread is, the question is, what did you do to mitigate the spread, to stop it from spreading like wildfire? And he's not able to answer that because he didn't do anything until March. And that's why, you know, he's receiving so much criticism for the delay.
So, Weijia, you asked him about that. You asked him about that ban that he constantly touts when he's standing there at the podium. We already pointed out that the president indicated that those protesters were standing 6 feet apart when the video clearly shows that they are not. Another thing that the president has said, and in fact, he said it again, which is that we, the United States, is testing millions and millions of people. In fact, the president said, quoting here, our testing is expanding very rapidly by millions and millions of people. Why would the president say that when, by all indications, the United States is only testing about 150,000 people per day? I wonder if White House officials have sort of tried to either walk that back or try to explain to you why the president keeps saying that our testing is expanding by millions and millions.
Again, that goes back to testing capacity, and you know he's throwing these numbers out there because he's calculating how many labs there are, how many labs have tests available to track this virus. But again, it all comes down to the point that capacity is very different from testing implementation to actually carrying out the tests. And in order to do that, you have to have the supplies. And remember, the entire world is going after these same supplies, these same resources that are part of these test kits. And that's why states are begging the federal government to get involved or begging the president to use the Defense Production Act to compel U.S. manufacturers to make some of these things. And I will say yesterday, the president said he was going to use the DPA to compel one company to make swabs for the testing kits. He would not say what company. The White House has not answered our multiple requests for clarification. And so we have to keep grilling him about, his intention of producing more swabs, but it's other things too, like reagents and plates and test tubes that these states really need. And so while he's talking about the millions and millions of tests that could be performed, the governors are saying, that's true. We could double and triple the number of tests we're actually doing, but you have to help us get us the goods. And so I think the big question that remains to be answered is why the president is so hesitant, is so reluctant to provide his full authority to get them what they need. And, some health experts have said the only thing that they can think of is that he wants to keep the number of official cases in the U.S. down compared to other countries, or at least lower than it already is, because it is quite high, to give the appearance of having control of the virus.
Listen, everyone agrees, or many people agree, that widespread testing is really the key to reopening the economy. But in the meantime, a lot of small businesses just have to stay alive during this. And this Paycheck Protection Program was supposed to help them stay alive, keep paying their employees, but it ran out of money really quickly. Will there be more money put in that pot anytime soon?
Well, the president said that an agreement could be reached as soon as today between the White House and lawmakers on Capitol Hill. And we're hearing the same thing, but they just have to work out some of the details because Republicans wanted to pass more emergency funding very quickly and just focus on getting more dollars to those small businesses. But Democrats said not so fast. They wanted to provide funds for hospitals and they wanted to provide more money for testing because, as you mentioned, it is such a critical component to reopening the country. And it looks like right now they're just working out the fine print. But we do expect there will be an additional about $300 billion given to small businesses and maybe $100 billion for hospitals and testing. But the question there is whether that will even be enough because, you know, the first round of aid, which was $350 billion, ran out in 2 weeks. And there's a backlog of applicants who didn't even get approved that first time around because there were so many businesses that needed help and continue to need help. And so we have to see if that's enough money. The president has indicated that he might be working on another stimulus package, but right now the administration is focused on just getting this money out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how that all plays out, Weijia. It's just another in a long line of promises that the president of the United States has made from that podium. You'll recall just a few weeks ago, early in March, he talked about Google and Google was going to create a nationwide coronavirus screening site that he touted. He had that flow chart that he displayed for all of you sitting there in the press corps, right. Which ultimately it was reported that Google had no intention of building any kind of website until the president mentioned it, and we're still waiting for those testing sites. Although now it's reported today that Google is providing information when you go to their website, to the Google search bars, on testing sites across the country, but they're not Google testing sites. We'll have to see how that all plays out. A lot of questions still, and I know, Weijia, you and your colleagues are trying to get at them every single day. We appreciate it every single day. Thank you, Weijia.
Thank you, guys.